I'm not a writer, but I feel like I need to share what happened during that hike. It was just supposed to be a fun day in the jungle, but it turned into something I'll never forget. It started out as a sunny Saturday morning. I packed some snacks and water and set out to meet my friends at the trailhead. The jungle was alive with sounds: the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, and the distant trickle of a stream. I felt excited and a little nervous. I've always loved nature, but hiking deep into the jungle always felt a bit risky. When we reached the trail, I was surprised to see it was just the three of us: me, Jake, and Lisa. We joked about how it would be like a scene from a movie, just the three adventurers against the wild. The beginning of the trail was well marked, but as we ventured deeper, it got narrower and overgrown. I noticed the sunlight filtering through the thick canopy, casting shadows that danced on the ground. It felt beautiful but also a little eerie. After a while, we stumbled upon a clearing. It was breathtaking, with vibrant flowers and a small pond. We decided to take a break, and Jake started taking pictures. Lisa and I sat down, enjoying the view. That's when we saw him, a guy sitting on a rock a bit further away. He looked like he had been there for a while, just staring at the ground. He seemed handsome, with dark hair and a strong build. At first, we thought nothing of it, but Lisa said he was acting weird. He kept glancing our way, and something about his stare made me uncomfortable. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe he was just another hiker like us. After all, the jungle was big, and we were in a remote area. After a few minutes, the guy stood up and walked toward us. I could feel my heart racing. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself as Alex. We exchanged small talk, but I noticed he seemed more interested in Lisa. I felt a weird vibe, like he was sizing her up or something. When we decided to move on, I suggested we stick together. Lisa agreed, but Jake seemed eager to continue chatting with Alex. I didn't want to be rude, but I was starting to get anxious. As we walked, I kept glancing back at Alex, who was following us a little too closely for comfort. Eventually, we reached a more secluded part of the jungle. Jake and Lisa were ahead, talking and laughing, while I trailed behind. That's when I heard a rustling sound coming from the bushes. I stopped, my heart pounding. I looked back, and to my horror, I saw Alex standing there watching me. He had this strange smile, and it sent chills down my spine. I hurried to catch up with my friends. When I finally reached them, I tried to explain what I'd seen, but Jake just laughed it off. He's just a fellow hiker, man. Chill out. Lisa didn't say much, but I could tell she was uneasy too. We decided to push on, but something didn't feel right. I could sense that we were being followed. The atmosphere changed, like the jungle was closing in around us. I kept looking over my shoulder, and each time I did, I saw Alex a bit closer. It was like he was playing a game, and we were the pawns. Finally, we reached a point where we could rest again. I was exhausted and terrified, but I wanted to keep Lisa safe. I suggested we head back, but Jake insisted we explore a bit further. Lisa agreed, and I felt helpless. We pressed on, but I could feel the tension rising. As the sun began to set, the jungle transformed. Shadows grew longer, and the sounds around us shifted to something more sinister. That's when we saw Alex again. He had this wild look in his eyes, and he stepped out from behind a tree, blocking our path. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice shaking. Jake laughed, thinking it was a joke, but I could see the fear in Lisa's eyes. She was frozen, staring at Alex. Suddenly, he lunged at Jake. I don't even know what happened next, it was all a blur. Jake tried to fight back, but Alex was too fast. In an instant, things went from surreal to horrifying. I heard Lisa scream, and I turned just in time to see Alex attacking her. My heart dropped. I couldn't believe this was happening. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. I finally snapped out of it and ran toward them, but it was too late. Alex had overpowered her. I couldn't get to her in time. The next few moments were chaotic. I screamed for help, but the jungle swallowed my cries. Alex turned to me, his face twisted in a way I'll never forget. I stumbled back, terrified, and somehow found the strength to flee. I ran through the underbrush, branches scratching my arms and legs, not daring to look back. Eventually, I found my way to a wider path. I ran until I reached the main road, gasping for breath. I flagged down a car and told them everything. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, we couldn't find the clearing, and they told me it might be too late. Later, I learned that they found Lisa. It hit me like a truck. She was gone, murdered by someone who seemed so charming at first. It was a psychopath hiding behind a handsome face. The police caught him weeks later, but the damage was done. I still can't shake the images from that day. The jungle, which once felt like an adventure, became a nightmare. I never want to step foot in those woods again, and I carry the weight of that day with me always. Lisa didn't deserve this, and I can't help but feel guilty that I couldn't save her. It's a pain that won't go away. Growing up in a small rural town, I always thought of our farmhouse as a safe haven. It stood at the edge of a vast cornfield, a place where summer evenings were spent catching fireflies and listening to the distant sounds of nature. But one fateful night last fall changed everything. It was a quiet evening, and my parents had gone to visit relatives. I was home alone, enjoying the stillness on the porch. The air was crisp, and the stars glittered overhead. I leaned back in my chair, sipping a soda, when I noticed a flickering light deep within the cornfield. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, maybe a firefly or something, but the light was too bright, too erratic. My heart began to race as I stood up. I grabbed a flashlight and decided to investigate. As I stepped off the porch, the atmosphere shifted. The usual sounds of crickets faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. I took a deep breath and ventured toward the edge of the field. With each step, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The light pulsed ahead, moving swiftly through the tall stalks. I called out, half expecting one of my friends to jump out and scare me. "Hey, is someone there?" My voice echoed back, swallowed by the darkness. I pressed on, the corn towering around me like a maze. The light danced just out of reach, teasing me to follow. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I was too curious to stop. Finally, I reached the spot where the light had been. Everything was pitch black. I shone my flashlight around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. And then, I saw it. Standing between the rows of corn was a figure. It was tall and unnaturally thin, almost skeletal, with skin that seemed to absorb the light around it. My breath caught in my throat. It looked like a person, but something was off wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I stood frozen, too scared to move. Suddenly, it turned its head toward me. I felt a jolt of pure terror. It was as if its eyes bored into my soul. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt glued to the ground. Just as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished, melting into the darkness like smoke. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Was I losing my mind? I bolted back to the house, slamming the door and locking it tight. My heart was pounding, and I grabbed my phone to call the police. I needed someone to take me seriously. The officers arrived shortly after, two of them with flashlights scanning the field. I told them what I saw, but I could tell they were skeptical. They assured me it was probably just my imagination, maybe a trick of the light. They went into the cornfield, leaving me alone on the porch, still shaken. After a long search, they returned empty-handed. "Nothing here," one officer said, frowning. "Just an empty field. Are you sure you saw something?" I nodded, but deep down, I felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. They left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That night, sleep was elusive. Every little sound made me jump. Hours passed, and just when I thought I might finally drift off, I heard it, a faint whispering like a voice carried on the wind. My heart raced as I crept to the window and peered outside. And there it was again, the flickering light, moving purposefully through the cornfield. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding, and stepped outside. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity held me in place. I took a hesitant step into the field, the corn rustling ominously around me. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The light paused, then flickered as if it recognized me. I felt an overwhelming urge to turn back, but I couldn't look away. Slowly, I moved closer, my heart in my throat. The air grew thick with tension, and I realized I was no longer alone. The shadows between the stalks shifted, and I caught a glimpse of that figure again, lurking just out of sight. Then, without warning, the light extinguished. I stood in complete darkness, my pulse racing. "What do you want?" I shouted, but the only response was an eerie silence. Before I could gather my thoughts, the figure darted toward me, faster than I could react. I turned and ran, stumbling through the corn, panic fueling my flight. I burst through the rows, desperately trying to find the path back to the safety of my home. Finally, I burst out of the field and onto the porch, gasping for breath. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. I couldn't explain what happened, and I wasn't sure if anyone would believe me. The next day, I tried to act normal, but the fear lingered like a shadow. I could still feel the weight of those unseen eyes watching me, waiting for the right moment to return. And that's when I decided some things are better left in the dark.